My entitled coworker bullied me for months over my breast implants. So I exposed the real reason why I had fake boobs and everyone went quiet. 4 years ago now, when I was 24, my mum died of breast cancer, and as both my grandmothers had also died of it, I saw a specialist for a screening. I found out I had some cells in one of my breasts that could have turned cancerous at any given moment. I was told I had two options: suffer through chemo treatments, or I could get a mastectomy and remove all of my breast tissue, basically eliminating the risk. I went for the mastectomy. It was admittedly the most drastic option, but after seeing what cancer did to my mum and grandmothers, I didn't want to risk it. I was warned about scarring but told it should be fairly minor. It wasn't, and I was left with two huge, pink, jagged scars on either side of my chest, and it caused me to go into a severe depression. So, I went to a surgeon and got a honker job. In the present day, I'm 28 years old and working in an office. My coworker, Jill, found out I'd had a honker job, but not about the cancer thing, when my friend from years before the mastectomy were planning a holiday and she made a joke about me going on a plane with my implants, and Jill overheard. By the end of the day, the entire office knew I'd had a honker job, but not why, and half a dozen people confirmed Jill had told them. Over the next few months, Jill made many jokes and comments about my chest to coworkers when I was in earshot, at one point saying I had more plastic than Barbie and calling me fake in 2 ways. I didn't hear this one myself, but a friend in the office told me that Jill had at one point referred to me as a sack of silicone. I asked her to stop more than once, but unfortunately, the places I talked to her were places like the lift and the women's bathroom, where there weren't any cameras, and Jill just kept making comments no matter how often I asked her not to. I wouldn't say it was every single day, but I heard at least 3 comments per week for 3 months. I hit my breaking point when me, Jill and a few other coworkers were having lunch. I referred to something as being shallow and Jill said, "You'd know all about being shallow," while gesturing to my chest. I snapped. I said, "Do you know why I have these? A few years ago the doctors found cancer in my breast tissue. I was advised to get a mastectomy and was left with huge ugly scars on my chest. I went to see a therapist who sent me to a cosmetic surgeon, who advised me to get implants to hide the scars, and I did just so I could look at myself in the mirror without crying. So maybe next time you want to judge someone for having cosmetic surgery, you should ask them why they had it first." And feeling like that was a mic drop moment, I picked up my food and left. For the rest of the day, my entire office was apologizing to me profusely. Jill began to get ignored at lunch and all of her friends started avoiding her. I felt like I had a whole army on my side. She still shoots me weird looks all the time, but I just ignore them because I know she's doing worse than me. Update: my entitled coworker bullied me for months over my breast implants. So I exposed the real reason why I had fake boobs and everyone went quiet. After I embarrassed Jill for her little bullying stint, I got an email from HR saying they wanted to talk to me the following day, and when I called for clarification they mentioned a hostile work environment. I knew the person who signed off the email and I'd spoken to. Her name was Debbie, and she was Jill's friend in HR, so I was fairly confident on who had reported me. I realized that if this was already being sent to HR, I needed as much ammunition as possible, so I went about collecting my information. As Debbie had dealt with me so far, it was safe to assume she would be the person reviewing the complaint with me, and if that was true I was effed. However, I vaguely remembered a section on complaints that was in my contract when I first signed with the company. I flicked through the contract and there was a part in the complaints section that said I was allowed to request a change of reviewer if I felt my reviewer was biased. Then I messaged the people who had offered their support over Facebook, and said basically HR have asked to see me. Do any of you remember Jill insulting me to your face, and are you willing to write and sign something saying what you heard and when? Not everyone was willing to help, as Jill is somewhat feared in the office due to her befriending HR and management, but about 20 people were willing to help me. I guessed roughly when I'd asked Jill to stop previously, and I wrote them all down, along with a rough time of when the lunchroom confrontation happened and a list of names of who was there for the lunchroom confrontation. I got to work slightly early the next morning. I went round everyone who had messaged me and most of them managed to give me a printed and signed letter. I wound up with about 16 letters, all from different people, and one of them was in the lunchroom for my conversation with Jill. Some even had bullet-pointed lists of everything Jill had said to them about me or other people. As it turns out, Jill has issues with a lot of people's appearances. She apparently made comments about one coworker's weight, and something anti-Semitic about a different coworker's nose, all of which were put in these letters. I took the letters from coworkers, the photocopy of the page in my contract, and my dates and times in a little folder with me. I got there and Debbie was the one overseeing the interview. She got up from her desk, ready to lead me into another room. I immediately turned to the other HR worker that was currently there and said, "So is my meeting with you, then?" Debbie said, "No, you're with me." I replied that this wouldn't sit well with me, as my contract states I have a right to an impartial overseer, and as I said this I took the contract page out of my folder. Debbie read it. I wouldn't let her take the paper when there was a shredder so close by, and said she could be impartial. I replied that I really didn't mean to be a pain, but I had it on good authority that the person on the other end of this complaint is her friend, and my contract does say I'm allowed an impartial overseer. Debbie stomped off to get supervisor. Supervisor asks how I know she can't be impartial, and I tell him that I have it on good authority that Jill, who was on the other end of this complaint, is a close friend of Debbie. He asked Debbie if this was true, to which she only replied, "I can be impartial." Supervisor asked the other HR rep to come with him, and the four of us all went to review the complaint. I thanked them for being so accommodating. Debbie took out the complaint and all three of them went through it with me. Debbie looked homicidal the whole time the interview was happening, as she had clearly anticipated firing me, or at least recommending me being fired. The interview went something like this. Q, you said outside that you think Jill last name reported you. Why is this? A, Jill has had an issue with me for about 3 months now. Q, why didn't you come to us when you realized Jill had an issue? A, I had no issue with her. Q, what issue does Jill have with you? A, 4 years ago I got breast implants due to a botched surgery to get rid of cancerous cells in my body. All of this is in my medical history, which you have a copy of in my file and my full permission to review. Jill found out about my breast implants but didn't know about the cancer. Jill had a problem with my breast implants, and decided to communicate this problem to our coworkers. Q, why do you feel this is true? A, here's 16 signed statements all from different coworkers, all testifying that Jill told the entire office I'd had breast implants on the day she found out and has since made comments about these implants frequently. They have quotes of what Jill said to them about it and rough dates and times. Q, had you had a conversation with Jill prior to this regarding her comments about you? A, several, spaced out over the last 3 months. Each time I communicated to her that I felt uncomfortable and upset with these comments she was making and would appreciate it if she were to stop. Q, to your knowledge, was Jill made aware of your former cancer at any point in this time? A, no. It wasn't mentioned in the conversation with my friend she overheard, and I didn't tell her because frankly it's none of her business, and I did not feel the need to detail my medical history to a coworker in order to avoid further intimate harassment. Supervisor stands up and says, well, I think we're done here. He shakes my hand and sends me back to my desk saying that I'd hear from them after they reviewed the evidence and made a decision on the case. About an hour goes by, then the person who wrote the letter and was there for the lunchroom conversation gets called for a meeting with HR. They come back 10-ish minutes later. The other people who were also there for the lunchroom conversation get called one by one, except Jill. Then, finally, Jill gets called in. She's gone for about 30 minutes and comes back fuming. She glares at me while I work, but I ignore her. 4:30-ish, Jill gets called into HR again. 5 p.m. rolls around, everyone is either leaving or getting ready to leave, when Jill storms back into the office. She glares at me the whole time she packs up her desk. She then starts telling anyone who will listen that I got her fired before shoving her way onto the lift. An email comes in from HR. My case is closed.